Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech Podcast and the new spin-off, Future Tech Health. And my guest today is Gillian Szollos. She's a founder of Keto All Day, Every Day. And we're going to talk about how she uses keto to work with epilepsy and various other subjects. So, Gillian, how you doing?
I am very well today. Thank you, Richard. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to talk to you. I appreciate you coming on. So, tell me a little bit about your again, I've said this many times, but whenever someone gets deep into health-related issues, unfortunately, it's often because they've had some health challenges or, loved ones. So tell me about how did you even find out about the keto world and why are you in it and involved in it?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, because I know we've got a lot of really cool things to talk about today, I won't go too far into my history because folks can look that up. They can look at my talk from KetoCon, or they can just look up my About Me on my website. But I'll give you a little bit of background. So in 2014, I was trucking along with my regular everyday life and felt that I was pretty healthy. I had always been overweight my whole adult life. I'd struggled with obesity and, did every single diet out there. And if anyone had come to me and said, "Oh, I've got one more diet for you," I might have punched them. But that's not what happened. Instead, I ended up having seizures. And these seizures sort of blindsided me, and they were horrible. And my whole life sort of derailed because I live out in the country. I had no access to public transportation. And the medication that I was put on really didn't help at all. In fact, things just got worse. The seizures got worse. They got longer. And the side effects of the medication were really crippling, to be blunt about it. They were horrific. And as a result, when everything sort of came to a head one night after I had upped my dose yet again, and I was now at the maximum level of my medication, and I was just so angry and sad, and it was just the pain was terrible. So I had a really, really, really bad day, and my husband decided to go online and to go to a seizure support group because he didn't know how to help me anymore, and things were really, really bad. One of the major side effects of the medication I was on was rage, and I'm not an angry person, but I was very angry while I was on that medication, angry and suicidal thoughts that I've never had in my life before. I mean, it was terrible. So he found keto, and I worked in health my 25 years, and I'd never heard of it before. I had sort of in the literature way back, but it wasn't part of my focus at all. And so I looked at this and I thought, well, whatever, I'll try. And I went to my doctor, and my doctor laughed and said, "Yeah, no, it only works with kids." And that was my neurologist. And then my family doctor said, "Well, never heard of it before, but I'll support you if you want to try it." And I started October the 23rd of 2014, and exactly 2 weeks later, I was seizure-free. And I have been
that's awesome.
Seizure-free for 4 years, this November the 5th. So I'm really excited about that.
That's great. Congratulations. And I'm glad you persevered, even though, the doctor didn't know, and then the other doctor said that it was only for kids, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was really that, or I went off all medication and died in my sleep. And that was the other option. And I was willing to do that at that point. So I was quite literally at that place. And the thing that was really interesting is that whereas the side effects of the medication were rage and anger and depression and, inability to get out of bed in the morning, the side effects of keto were a 90-pound weight loss, feeling great, tons of energy, and no more fibromyalgia, no more arthritis, no more pain in my life. And so, I started weightlifting and powerlifting, and just it changed so many things. And for me, it was such an epiphany. And I was lucky enough that I knew that there was a big Metabolic conference coming to Canada that year in 2015, and I was asked to do a poster presentation and present my case there. So I did, and I got a chance to meet, Dom D'Agostino and Stephen Pinney and Jeff Bullock and, all the bigwigs in the keto universe, especially the therapeutic keto universe. And that was really where everything just started. I started realizing, wow, someone's got to tell the story of these individuals who are profoundly changing their lives with diet. And that's how I started Keto All Day, Every Day.
That's great. Yeah, I've interviewed a number of the people you mentioned. They're all very knowledgeable, very great people. Are you attending the Metabolic Health Summit that's coming, I believe, in January?
No, that's the same one. I was at that one, not last year because they skipped last year, but the year before in Tampa. But it's out on the West Coast this year, and I was just at Low Carb USA, and I don't think my husband will let me shut off to the sun again right now because I got a couple of other conferences coming up in the next few months. So I'm going to have to take a miss on that one this year, but I will definitely, when they bring it back to the East Coast next year, I will be there for sure.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. You healed yourself. What you mentioned offline that you're a biohacker. So I would bet that you've tried a lot of things in keto that most people haven't tried and experimented. So what are some of the experiments you've done, and what have you noticed?
Well, I think the really important message that needs to get out there into the universe is that, each of us is an individual, and we each have different, epigenetic expression. We have different, genes. We have different metabolic stressors in our life. We have all kinds of things that sort of dictate what we're going to respond to. And not everybody responds to the same thing. So for those people who are using keto diets therapeutically, we are generally speaking looking for pretty high ketones. And by high, I mean, not necessarily the sort of nutritional range of 0.5 to 1.5, but, over 1.5 and sometimes as high as 4 or 5 on a regular basis. And I'm sure you've discussed this in the past with other with other people you've had on the podcast, but the glucose ketone index is a really nice little scale to kind of measure, how you're doing and whether or not you're achieving the goals that you want. And just for your listeners, that is your glucose number in millimolar. So sorry, you Americans have to do some math. And then you divide it by your ketones. So a therapeutic range is as close as you can get to 1 and preferably under 1, but they consider under 3 to kind of be therapeutic. So to put that in perspective, that means that when I wake up in the morning and my blood sugar is 3.6, which I even went so far as to load a chart because I was pretty sure we might talk about this. That would be... What is that in milligrams 65, per deciliter, by the way? That'd be about 65.
Whoa, really?
So if I wake up in the morning and it's 3.6 and my ketones are 4.2, then that's great. I'm under 1 for sure. My blood sugar hit 2.1, which is about 43 or so, I think, the other day. But it was good because I'm not symptomatic. I've been doing this for 4 years and I had no symptoms of hypoglycemia, so that worked well. But so for me, I'm usually pretty happy if my range is, even 3 to 6. So ketones ranging around 1.5. I feel really good. My brain feels good. I don't feel, like I might be on the verge of an aura or anything like that. But somebody else might feel that they function optimally a little higher than that, or even a little lower than that. And it kind of makes me sad when I see everyone out there in the, in the interweb chasing ketones, not really understanding what that metric actually really means, and that it might not actually mean anything, depending on on what the goals are and whether you've exercised, all that kind of thing.
So you're talking about the blood sugar to ketone ratio. You're trying to get it into the 1-to-1 range, right?
Around there, yeah, under 3. So. And that means that usually I just want my blood sugar and my ketones to be very closely correlated. I want them to be really close together, nice and tight. The tighter they are, the better. And if my ketones are a little higher than my blood sugar, that's actually even better.
But how do you control your ketone level? I've almost never heard anyone talk about, they're happy just to get into ketosis. Or to say, use the Precision Extra. So tell me, what are the hacks you've done? Because I've used like the Precision Extra. I've measured my ketones, and I've gotten like 1.5. What I noticed is it took me several months to get above like a 0.9 or a 1. And I was so happy when I got to 1.5 the first time. But what have you noticed? Like, how do you control your ketone level?
So I guess the first thing is to understand whether or not that's even relevant with, in terms of what the numbers are. And so, if you're a really fit guy, then you may be very effective at using ketones from your bloodstream as fuel. And that means that your numbers may be lower for some time. And when I started my ketogenic journey, my ketones were frequently above 4, like almost all the time. And that's with a fat macro of about 80% of my calories coming from fat. And that's pretty much what you need for a therapeutic level. But after 4 years, my ketones are down in the 0.6 to 1 range on a regular basis because I'm just really good at using it. I've become good at converting. So I think first thing is the levels in your blood mean way less than whether or not you're achieving your goals. So are you seizure free, or are you feeling really mentally sharp, or are you losing the weight you want, or is your A1C being managed? Like those are really easy trackable things that people don't need to measure their ketones for every day to actually know that they're achieving some really great health gains. And you don't need to know what your blood ketones are for that. And so you don't need to stress out about them. But if you have cancer or you're trying to biohack to figure out what your comfort zone is, like where are you actually seizure free? Let's just use that one because I have epilepsy. So if I were tracking my blood sugar and my ketones every day, and as I have for like almost 2,000 days now, so if I were doing that every single day, and I noticed that I only had seizures when my glucose ketone index was over 6, then I would work really hard to keep that in the range of 6. And in answer to your question, the way I do that is with fat as a lever. So, there's a lot of talk about, eating the fat off your plate or the fat off your body. And a lot of people are using this way of eating to, lose some extra pounds. And sometimes that's valid. Then you might not want to be ingesting as much fat. But if you need those therapeutic ketone levels to be high in your blood because for some reason that is impacting the electrical signaling in your brain, i.e. for epilepsy or neurodegenerative disease, then you do have to crank up the fat on your plate. And that's one of the amazing things about this is we don't even really know exactly how ketones impact the electrical activity for epilepsy. We just know that they do.
So, okay. So you mentioned if you have too much fat, you may not lose weight if that's your goal, but you may need a tremendous amount of fat in order to stave off seizures or, or perhaps cancer.
Yeah, and one of the really interesting things, and I mean, this is an aside, but when I lost all the weight, I didn't lose it in the way that a lot of people on keto do, like 100 pounds in a year, boom, gone, which is remarkable, by the way. And I just kudos to those guys because I know it takes a lot of discipline to get there. But I had all the discipline because I can't afford not to have it. And yet I lost 50 pounds in the first year and 40 pounds in the second year. And then the third year, I gained a lot of lean mass because I was working out and lifting a lot of heavy things a lot of the time, but I didn't lose as much fat mass as I liked. And it was then that I really realized that although I've been diagnosed with lipedema, which just for your listeners is actually a rare adipose disease. It's the disease they call fat or painful fat disease. And this lipedema fat tends to locate itself on women's hips and thighs, and it is disproportionately laid down there. So, my waist is 27 inches and my thigh is 27 inches, which I joke with Danny Vega, his thigh is 27 inches, but it's all muscle and mine's not. So I have this disease, and for listeners who are interested, there's a fantastic resource out there called the lipedemaproject.org. Really amazing. Just Google the lipedema project and learn a lot. But that fat is just so stubborn and it's so difficult to mobilize. And it doesn't matter how good you are. It's just really, really stubborn and tends not to respond to diet or exercise. And the party line that women are given is it doesn't respond to diet or exercise. The only thing that you can do is have surgery. But keto does work. And I think the reason it works is that it really drives insulin levels really low. And so I'm actually in the middle of a biohack right now. I've got a continuous glucose monitor implanted in me, and I'm doing my ketones every day, and I'm tracking everything that I eat, and I'm trying to keep my my glucose ketone index at 1 or below every single day for 30 days, which is a challenge. But that means I need to eat an enormous amount of fat. And this is where people start to get confused. Like, why do you have to eat so much fat to lose it? But there are some people, and women in particular, and perimenopausal or postmenopausal women in particular, who just cannot seem to mobilize their own adipocytes unless they're taking in a pretty good amount of fat. I'm about 140 grams of fat a day. Oh, can I still have you?
Sorry, one sec. Yep. So you said you're at 140 grams a day of fat. Is that, I mean,
yep.
Let's put that in context for people. What, because that may sound like a lot or may not sound like a lot. What does that look like, or what does that feel like?
I think for a lot of people, they would consider that pretty high, but that looks like right now, because of the specific hypothesis that I'm working on, it's all got to be from saturated fat. So right at the moment, I'm taking in, 3 tablespoons of lard at my first meal, and 3 tablespoons of lard and 2 tablespoons of coconut oil at my second meal. And then I'm eating meats that are all extremely high in fat. So, ribeye and a little bit of pork, but mostly ribeye. So to sort of put this in perspective, in my year 3, once I'd sort of reached pretty much my goal weight, I was like 175 and feeling really great, feeling really strong. I got lazy and I ate my normal keto food, but I really didn't prioritize the fat anymore. So I was down in the 90 grams a day, 75, 80 grams a day of fat. And I was shocked when I had a DEXA scan and found that I'd gone up 10% body fat in a year because I had dropped my fat. That was just such a shock to me. But then again, it made sense with this lipedema because the place it had packed on was my thighs and my bum. So now that I'm back to the really high fats, 120, 140 grams a day, it's coming off. My first week, I lost 8.5 pounds. So that was really nice.
God, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I'll let you know how it works out when I'm done. I'm still about 4 weeks away from wrapping this little project up, but I'm hoping to put it all together and get it out there on the interwebs so people can see it. And I'm hoping that the calipers will say nice things.
Yeah, so I've spoken to Jimmy Moore, and I've looked at him, and I really celebrate the guy because he's still pretty heavy, but he's out there speaking and all that and helping people. I've been on keto for a while. I still have plenty of weight to lose, and I'm kind of at a plateau. So have you found many people that will do keto, for instance, and they'll get to a plateau with weight and just can't lose anymore? Or is there something else that, there's something they're doing wrong, or like maybe it's not enough fat as you're saying, or what do you think?
Well, again, I think there are a couple of things there. Everybody plateaus, period. Everybody's going to plateau. And I guess it just depends how you define a plateau. So I don't define a plateau as not losing weight for, 3 days or even 3 weeks. If you haven't lost anything in inches or measurement, because I really think that's almost a better predictor than the scale. But if you haven't lost anything in inches in 6 weeks, then I think you could call it a stall. And yeah, I mean, there are a few culprits. I think people really overdo the nuts and the seeds. And, I had a post out on my Instagram the other day that said, stop asking if it's keto and start asking, is it real food? And then ask, is it good for me? Because people have different food sensitivities and you can be eating everything right. And if you've got food sensitivities, that's going to be an issue. Or if you have a fundamental metabolic problem, like a thyroid issue, then that could potentially be slowing you down. But 9 times out of 10, it's people are getting on the keto bandwagon because there are so many great recipes out there for keto junk food. And quite literally, they're substituting what might not be a really fantastic diet today for a keto diet that is quote unquote keto that has huge amounts of nut flour in it, and seed flour in it and lots and lots and lots and lots of sweets, which really are just perpetuating the problem, which is that, we are all massively sugar addicted. And
right.
and I think, so that's part of the issue. And the other piece is just keeping the macros isn't good enough. You've got to be mindful of the quality of food that you're eating. And what I think is really important is not just the quality of the food, but the quality of the fats. And so if you're eating out and you think that you can go to Five Guys and pick up a couple of burgers fried in soybean oil and that'll be okay for you, that's not okay for you. And I think that the types of oil have been really, really problematic. And a friend of mine tagged me on Michael Eads' talk on YouTube, which is really, really good about this, and talks about reverse electron transfer at the adipocyte itself, and that if you're eating saturated fat, that fat cell will fill up and say, "Thanks, I'm good," and put the energy back into the bloodstream where the metabolism will ramp up and help burn it off. But if you're eating these really, really, really toxic soybean oil, canola oils, those kinds of things, that mechanism doesn't happen. And so, it can get bigger and bigger and bigger and cause more and more inflammation. And then all kinds of other bad things happen when that inflammation really starts picking up. So I think, Sols, I would say real food first, prioritize your real food. Ask yourself, how often are you having a treat? Is it just for your birthday or is it for everybody you know's birthday? Because that's, we can justify just about anything, right? And I would really just say, keep it as clean as possible. And if that's still not working, look into some sensitivities, maybe FODMAPs, maybe, getting rid of the more inflammatory foods. And for some people, I hate to say this, but it can be avocados, our favorite friends. But that can actually be a big problem, especially for people who've had a lot of anti-epileptic drugs in the past. Sometimes coconut oil and avocado can actually be the things that they're sensitive to.
Huh. I didn't think about that. So to follow your your analogy, let's say I go to like McDonald's and I have 4 of their hamburger patties. I throw away the buns and I just have that, and I think I'm eating keto. That still might not be good for me because it's low quality meat. It could be fried in all kinds of garbage.
Exactly.
Is that an example?
Yeah. And so if the whole point, we have to go back to, why is keto such a big thing right now? Why is it helping so much in chronic pain and diabetes and obesity? It's because it is fundamentally anti-inflammatory. And it's anti-inflammatory because the key ingredients are anti-inflammatory. But if we are not cooking at home with our olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, butter, ghee, those kinds of things, and instead we're going out to restaurants 50% of the time, I guarantee you they are not cooking with that. I went to have Thai the other day, hoping I could just get a satay. And I asked, what do you guys fry it in? Assuming it would be coconut oil. Nope, absolutely not. Soybean oil.
And that's no good.
No.
What's your opinion of some of the helper items out there? I've seen exogenous ketones, intermittent fasting, maybe even metformin, that kind of stuff. Do you use any of those tools, or have you observed people that are using those tools?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. Let's start with the exogenous ketones. Fundamentally, I don't think the vast majority of people need to have exogenous ketones on board. But again, it really depends on what their goals are. So if you're an endurance athlete and you're trying to do a couple 100 kilometers on your bike, then it could be really, really helpful. And the research, I think, is pretty clear that it is helpful. If you have epilepsy and you find that exercise is a trigger for seizures because the very fact that you're exercising tends to lower your ketone level in your blood because you are using those ketones for fuel during your exercise. So fueling during that sport or that activity with some beta-hydroxybutyrate, salts as an electrolyte drink could be really, really effective and could really help to prevent. And in fact, I had a lady contact me the other day about this exact same thing, and we were having this discussion, and she told me that once she tried it with her son, it worked brilliantly, and he stopped having seizures right after his hockey game. So that's a perfect place for using it. And I use them myself every once in a while as rescue If I've done something stupid or I've eaten out and I wasn't 100% sure that what I ate was as carb-free as I thought it was, if my brain starts to feel not perfect, or if my glucose ketone index gets over 6, then I will resort to that. But do I think it's good for people who are trying to lose weight? No. In fact, it stops you from burning your own ketones. That's sort of the whole point. And I know that Dom D'Agostino had a really.
What do you mean it stops you? Like, what? How could you use it? Could you use it to lose weight, or is it just no good at all?
My understanding is that there is not a single peer-reviewed journal out there that supports exogenous ketones for weight loss, and that's right from Dom D'Agostino's website. He's really clear about that. There doesn't seem to be any correlation, and it makes sense, right? Like, you have ketones in your blood because you're burning your own fat. If you drink ketones, you will not make ketones. And people have to remember that in the same way that your insulin brings your blood sugar down when it gets really high, if your ketones get really high, what do you think brings it down? Insulin. And we're trying to avoid high states of insulin on a regular basis. So the reason that healthy people do not get into ketoacidosis is because when their ketones get, out of that a happy zone, they do have the ability for insulin to bring them down. So I think for weight loss, I would never suggest that to any of my clients. No. A lot of people say as a bridge, sort of getting onto keto, it can be good as an appetite suppressant. That I believe there is some research to support that it works as an appetite suppressant, but it's a really expensive appetite suppressant, and it works and it's in your system for about an hour and a half. So, again, I would rather make my own. And remember, when you're making your own, you're not just making beta hydroxybutyrate, right? You're making 3 different kinds of ketones, and you have all of the side effects of the actual process of making those ketones that can be really, really beneficial to your health. So again, I think it's a big buzzword right now, and I think there's a lot of money to be made by creating products that support this way of living, because people are finding that the way of living helps. But I would just tell people to bring it back to basics. Like, you do not need all the bells and whistles. You can do this all by yourself just by going to the grocery store. And that is incredibly empowering, Richard. I mean, where else is there something like that you can get these kind of benefits just by making a decision, right? To choose kale over cake.
So what about intermittent fasting? What role do you see it has?
I love it. I think it's great. I mean, for most people who've been doing keto for a while, it just sort of happens automatically. I personally normally fast about sort of 16 hours before I start my eating window. But nowadays, on this particular little biohack that I'm doing, I am fasting for 20 to 21 hours a day and just eating in 3 to 4 hours a day. And or 4 to 5 hours a day. Yeah, 3 to 4. And yeah, it's great. I'm shocked by how often I look at food sitting out on the counter or in the fridge or in my drawer at work and think, wow, when I wasn't doing this, I might actually be eating a pork rind right now, or I might be reaching for the peanut butter right now. So I think it's just good to get you in a mindset where you don't need to think about eating, and you accomplish a lot more when you're not obsessing about food all day long. And I definitely think that the therapeutic, applications are fantastic and have been well reported by, Dr. Jason Fung and others. And yeah, I use it myself. I'm not really good at long fasts yet. I'm trying to get a bit better, but I'm unfortunately the longest I've gone is like a little over 74 hours, and I don't like it. I have to be honest. I didn't like it. I didn't have fun.
Do you feel like you even need it? It's just 72 hours. 74 is a long time.
I don't think I do because of how I live my life daily. But if I were a metabolically flexible individual who did not have epilepsy, I would try to have a longer fast at least a couple of times a year, just to really get the benefits of having those longer fasts. The fact that, I pretty much do this anyway on a daily basis, I believe I can probably get away from having to do a 3 or 4 or 5 day fast, but I just wanted to do it to see if I could.
Okay, interesting. Well, so what other tweaks and hacks, that have you advised maybe other people to do and to try, and what effects has it had? Any interesting things that people have done you see works better?
I think one of the things people miss a lot, and in spite of almost everybody saying it out loud, is electrolytes. You have to do electrolytes right in order to be successful on this way of eating. And doing it right depends on the individual. And it's also important to not overdo it because, too much potassium is a really bad thing for your heart. So you do have to be cognizant of the fact that if you're doing this and you're eating, especially really low carb, like under 20 grams total carbs a day. I'm a total carbs girl. I'm not a net carbs girl. And so making sure you're getting adequate sodium, adequate potassium, and adequate magnesium, and almost everybody's magnesium deficient in the universe out there. So it's really important to get that done, and then to do blood work. You do need to be supported by a primary care provider if this is something that you're going to do, especially for a really long time, because there are some people who should not do keto. And, there are a lot of people out there talking about how awesome it is. And it's awesome. It's revolutionized my life, that's for sure. And all the people I talk to in the universe are super keen on it. But there are some people who should not do it. And if the person you're getting advice from can't tell you at least 3 types of people who should not be doing keto, then you should probably be getting your advice somewhere else, because there are some metabolic issues and some blood diseases and some, familial genetic issues that you'd not be happy on keto at all.
So where are you taking things over the next 6 months or a year? What's, you're working on your new experiments just on yourself. What else do you see that's going to be super helpful for people that want to get involved?
I'm busy doing a bunch of things. I'm doing some lipedema research with this wonderful gang out of the Lipedema Project, and that's going to be really interesting. And I am hoping to move. I was writing stories on people who are using keto therapeutically, and I have those up on my website right now. But I'm moving to more YouTube videos and more of the podcast, because it's just what people want these days. They want to be able to listen and not necessarily to read. So I'm really looking forward to ramping that up. And that podcast is going to be called "What Does Food Have to Do with It?" So look for that. It'll be coming up in the next 6 months. And if I say it out loud now, I have to actually light a fire under my butt and get it going. But
good.
That'll be fun. But I'm really wanting to emphasize the importance of people taking control of their own health and learning that it's doable, and that, every single person out there, in my humble opinion, should have their own medical chart, like in their own hands. And that means getting a copy of your blood work, understanding how these things impact your life, because, not everybody needs to be keto all the time either. It's, we talk about it being a lifelong thing, but if you're fundamentally metabolically flexible, you don't need to do that all your life. Sure, eat low carb all your life, absolutely. But you don't necessarily need to be in ketosis every single day, 24/7, 365. And
right.
For some of us, we do. But if you don't, then go with that, because that's how you were created. That's how your body was designed to be. It was designed to be flexible, and use that flexibility to your advantage, and do cool things and run marathons. And let me ask you, what's been your biggest hurdle when it comes to a stall?
When it comes to trying to be keto, my biggest hurdle?
Like just a stall, a stall or a plateau.
I feel like I've been stalled for a while, but my biggest problem is movie popcorn. Like once a week I'll go to the movies and I'll have popcorn, and I know that's just all carbs. But my biggest hurdle is that I feel like I have to be super strict in order to lose weight. I lost a bunch, but I still have a lot more to lose. I was never this heavy years ago. But if I'm not super strict, it just doesn't happen, and that's frustrating. It's not fair, but there's not really much I can do, I think.
Mm-hmm. And that, I think, sometimes speaks, not necessarily for you, but maybe for you, to, your level of insulin sensitivity. And so people who are more insulin resistant tend to have to be a lot more, careful, and they have to be careful with things like dairy and with those nuts, which when I tell my keto classes that they can only have 3 ounces of nuts a week, they get very upset with me. But that can really put a crimp into things. And I think you're right. I think for me and my lipedema, it needs to be really strict. And for you may find that periods of being really ultra strict will be able to lead you to being a little less strict once you get to where you want to be. And I don't know if you guys have it in Chicago, but we have this stuff up here called Buddha popcorn. I buy it for my daughter. And 2 cups of it is actually, it's only 8 grams of total carbs in 2 cups.
I'll have to try that. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe you should take that in your inside, coat pocket when you go to the movies.
You're right. That'd actually be a really good idea. It's hard to stuff. It's kind of bulky, but yeah, that's a really good idea. I can line my coat with it.
That's right. It will be insulation as well as we get colder.
Very cool. Well, cool. So what's the best way for folks to get in touch and to find out more and engage with all your resources?
Well, they can come and see me at KetoCon. I'm really excited. I'll be going back and speaking at KetoCon this year again in Austin in June, and planning to be on the low carb cruise as well with Jimmy. So I'm really looking forward to that. So people want to take a holiday in May, come on the cruise with us, and then they can find me at my website at ketoalldayeveryday.com. And I warn people, especially you guys out there who are really technologically advanced, my website is in its toddler phase because I do have a full-time job, and I'm just trying to create this platform that is free and accessible and just has good information. And so it's a very, very slow project, but I'm hoping maybe someone out there would like to reach out to me and help me pull this off. But at the moment, it's a work in progress, and look for some of my YouTube videos I'm putting up, and definitely listen for the podcast in the next couple of months.
All right, that's great. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. It's been really good to talk to you.
And you, Richard, thank you so much.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.